Every month, Cyber Collective hosts creative research events to educate and inform on technical topics related to data ethics, security, and privacy. In this video, you'll learn about algorithmic bias with the one and only Dr. Safiya Noble. Thank you for joining us. Let's jump right in.
This is super exciting. I know we have a lot of people jumping in. V, what do you think? Should I get started or should we give it a few more minutes?
I think we should get started.
Same.
If you're on time, early bird gets the worm.
Yeah. Sometimes the early worm gets caught. I shared that with my recent read of Adam Grant's book, The Originals, which kind of blew my mind. But welcome, everybody. We are so excited to have everyone here tonight. I'm full of energy. I'm so excited about this conversation tonight. And for those of you that do know me, hello, so amazing to see familiar faces. And for those of you that don't know me, I am Tazeen Khan, CEO and founder of Cyber Collective. And I'm joined here with our amazing team. We have Vanessa, Farah, Rebecca, and Caroline, and they'll be in the chats and available for questions. And obviously everyone's going to be here. So I'm going to walk us through tonight's agenda real quick, and we're just going to get her done because we have a great topic tonight. So I'm going to share a little bit about who we are, our mission, the basics, what we're about, which will cover our rules of engagement, give you guys a quick little update about some things we're working on right now. And then I'm going to pass it over to our head of ethics, Caroline Sue. She's going to lay the grounding foundation. Hopefully all y'all did your homework about algorithms, algorithmic oppression. We've been sharing so much information on our socials, but she's going to give that background, and we're going to open up the floor like we always do to get feedback and insights from our community. And then we are going to jump in with the legend, Dr. Safiya Noble, and I'm going to share we'll share her bio later, and we'll share all of the good stuff once we get there. But let's jump right into who we are. So we're a community-centered research organization that hosts events to both teach and understand the way data and privacy impact consumers. Our goal is literally to educate people in order to center marginalized voices within this dialogue, what we're talking about right now, assess their knowledge, and then gather your direct input so that we can influence change within policy and within industry. And what we're about is really important as well. So authenticity matters to us. Cyber Collective was born out of the fact that, we don't want to code switch. We want to be ourselves exactly how we are. And we welcome that. We welcome authenticity. But welcoming authenticity means you have to also be inclusive and respectful. And we don't take any disrespect in any shape or form in here. You will get cut, but we know that doesn't happen. So we don't have to worry about that. Just make sure that if you are speaking up or if you're sharing anything, know that there are a lot of people in the room that possibly want to share as well. So just giving people the space to speak and share, because we're a community and everyone's voice is important to us. And we want to hear from everybody and make sure that we're creating a safe space to learn. Before we dive in tonight, many of you may or may not know that we are currently fundraising through iFund Women. Because of all of the support and contributions so far, we've been able to raise in upwards of 15K. I think we're almost at 15,500 and our goal is 100K. If everybody in here gave $20, we would literally be so much closer to our goal. This funding is going to go to marketing, it's going to go to further research, and it's going to go into operations. And with the funding already, we were able to purchase some tools that are going to help level up a lot of these events that we have and a lot of the information that you all are receiving. And look, we also get that it's a really hard time right now. And if you aren't in a place to be able to contribute, no problem. You can use your voice. If you can amplify the fact that we're fundraising, it would be incredible. We're dropping in the chat right now a Google document that has messaging available, broken down of how to share with a colleague, how to share with friends and family, how to share with different types of people that may be in your life with the link. So literally made it as easy as possible for you. So, and if you are in here and you already have contributed from the bottom of our hearts, like, you seriously are helping fund this work, and we just appreciate you deeply. So without further ado, I would love to introduce the one and only Caroline Sue.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today. I'm so excited to share this space with you all. My name is Caroline Sue. I'm our head of ethics, and I'm going to give you a really quick, 5-minute primer on algorithmic bias and what exactly algorithms are. So with algorithmic bias, I think a lot of you who have kind of been attending our events have heard me or the rest of us talk about this a lot, but we have a lot of algorithms out in the wild, out in the world, that are doing things and making decisions about us constantly using our data. And a lot of times these algorithms have real effects in the real world. So they'll decide who gets a job, who gets a loan, who gets housing, and even down to things like what you see on your Facebook news feeds and what kind of ads you get served on Instagram. So these algorithms have such far reach, especially when it comes to the context of technology. But I want to go through the definition of algorithms and what they are exactly at their kind of simplest form. So in their simplest form, an algorithm is essentially a set of instructions that we can follow to achieve an end result. So if the end result, this is super important to me, if the end result that I'm trying to achieve is dinner, then the algorithm that I might follow is a recipe. If the end result that I'm trying to achieve is sitting at Vanessa's house, the algorithm that I might follow would be the directions that Google Maps gives me. So that's kind of the really broad definition of algorithms that I think helps us kind of understand what it means when we talk about algorithmic bias. So typically when we talk about bias in algorithms and these decision-making systems, we're typically talking about a very small subset, maybe not small, but a very specific subset of algorithms, specifically machine learning algorithms. And essentially these are special and they're different because they can teach themselves, or they learn themselves based on the data that you feed it, how to get to that end result, either more efficiently, more quickly, or more accurately. So what actually happens when we develop these machine learning algorithms and we kind of drop them into social contexts? A lot of kind of wonky stuff starts to happen sometimes. A couple of classic examples of algorithmic bias are the Amazon recruiting tool, which some of you may have heard of, and then the Compass recidivism algorithm that a couple of years ago, ProPublica did an investigation on. So with Amazon's recruiting tool, they basically figured out about 5 or 6 years ago that they were not hiring very many women. And they did some investigation. They figured out that their recruiting tool was biased against women. So if you had, the women's soccer team or the women's chess team in your resume, or you went to a women's college, you were going to be penalized and either rejected or docked in some way. Super troubling. With the recidivism algorithm, that's basically a fancy way of saying that the judges and parole officers across the country, across the US, would use the Compass algorithm essentially to predict whether people who had committed crimes in the past would commit crimes in the future. Okay, this seems maybe reasonable, maybe not the best use of our time, depending on who you talk to. But the troubling thing about this was that basically ProPublica did an investigation. They found out that Black people who had committed crimes were twice as likely to be predicted to commit crimes in the future than their white counterparts. Super, super, super troubling. And they have a really great report, especially if you're into kind of the math and the numbers behind these models. Definitely would recommend looking into that. A more recent example of this is an image generating algorithm that about a month ago, a couple of researchers found some very troubling things. So basically, if you had fed this image generating algorithm a photo of a man, 43% of the time, it would autocomplete the rest of the photo with a picture of a suit. What happens when you fed it a photo of a woman, including AOC? 53% of the time, they would autocomplete the rest of the photo with her in a bikini or low-cut top. Super troubling, very, very interesting kind of, yes, definitely such trash. So these are kind of the consequences that we're seeing of algorithmic bias and the ways that bias kind of gets encoded into these decisions that are being made at scale. The next thing that I want to talk about, well, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip this section. I wanted to talk a bit about where exactly bias seeps into the data science pipeline. A lot of people will say that it comes in at the data sets, but there are a lot of other different places where this bias can seep in. If you want to do more research about this, I would encourage you to do that. If you want to chat with me on Instagram, my DMs are open. Please feel free to do that. But I actually am curious to hear kind of your experiences and make this more of a conversation, kind of hear if there are examples of algorithmic bias that you have encountered in your own lives. And I know that Vanessa has one very interesting example that she encountered last week. So I'll turn things over to her.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Vanessa. I'm the head of ethics here at Cyber Collective. Before we jump into my example, I would love to hear from anyone in the audience if you have experienced anything similar to this. If now this is piquing your interest, maybe you saw something in the past and you didn't have the language to it. So I'd love to open it up to the audience to see if you've experienced this firsthand. Anyone want to share? I hear someone. Well, it's okay. If you don't want to share, no problem. I'll go ahead and share my example. Last week, I was researching different examples of discriminatory algorithms in preparation for this event. And one in particular really struck me, especially as I kind of felt shocked that I saw it, which is silly on my part because we know that these tools are created in that space. I was listening to Dr. Safiya's book as I was researching, kind of just trying to refresh my mind. And I took the physical image from her book, which is, if you're not familiar, it's a Google search engine that says, "Why are Black women so?" And then it populates all of these I type, and when I would actually click search, that's when the racist and harmful stereotypes showed up on the first image. And I was thinking, with the current state of the world, successful, why are they leading businesses in the US? There are so many other things that could have been entered in that space, but they weren't. When I typed in "why are Latina," I didn't even get to the women part, and it just populated "why are Latina women so spicy?" So why are Latina parents so toxic? Why are Latina women so emotional? All of the, reinforced biases and stereotypes against Latina women. And I immediately screenshotted all this and sent it to our creative research manager, Farah, and she searched it on her end. And she noticed that when you typed in the gender term women or men, that nothing would populate because and the engineers over there, which I'm sure none of them are Latina, didn't that particular phrase. So that's a perfect example of reinforced bias. So someone that has no experience with Latina women, and we're using this has this group as, authority, as they know everything. And instead of it showing actual facts about Latina women, not implied racism and biases, people are going to take what they see there because now Google has positioned themselves as a library of some sort, as an authority, and they're not going to think to do a little bit more critical thinking or diving into what's presented. So that's just an example. And I think if you all use Google right now, you'll see it populate still. It's very there. So without further ado, I am so excited, super honored to introduce Dr. Safiya Noble. Before I open the mic to her, I want to share a little bit of her brilliant background. She is the co-founder and co-director of the UCLA Center for critical internet inquiry. She's the author of Algorithms of Oppression, which we love here. And she not only talks the talk, but she walks the walk. She's a huge advocate for organizations similar as ours, and how she advocates for us is being here in this space with you all. So this is an amazing opportunity for you all to ask her any questions that are pressing on your mind. I know a lot of you here are researchers yourself or work within tech or just want to understand how this works. So without further ado, Dr. Safiya Noble.
Hi, everybody. It's so exciting to be here. I stand so hard for CyCo, and I am just so thrilled to get to be here as part of this event today. My internet is trash, so I just want to apologize in advance that if I drop, just, I don't know, play some Beyonce or something and I'll be right back. But I want to say that this is an amazing organization. And I tell you, I speak all over the world about these issues of discriminatory technologies, the harms of all kinds of platforms and technologies. And it is so rare to get to enter into a conversation and a community that is mostly or all women of color. That is such a safe, beautiful space, quite frankly, for me to get to participate in. And it is, again, so incredibly rare for me in my days and weeks and months. So I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me here today. And I'd love to just say a couple of words and then, we could just have a conversation this afternoon, whatever, talk about all the things. One of the things I want to share is that 10 years ago, when we had when we would talk about technology, it was almost impossible to make a conversation about technology discriminating, like at the level of code, understood. It just couldn't be understood. People would say to me, I remember when I was first working on my dissertation at the University of Illinois, and I said, I was looking at the, Vanessa, the kinds of things you're talking about. I was, all of us here today, and I'm looking at the chat. Everybody's putting in these different amazing examples, and I can remember that I was looking at these things and seeing these things too, and saying, I think something's happening at the level of code. This is a programming issue. This is a logic around what is most profitable, because there's no way when you do searches on Black girls or Latina girls or Asian girls that you should be getting pornography on the front page as the primary representation of women and girls of color. And of course, these websites are all adult women who, as far as we know, are consenting. And so, the idea that women fundamentally at just like a basic level get coded as girls, right, is an issue. But then what about the actual children? So, I remember having these conversations. I'm not kidding you. It was like 2010 in grad school. And when I would talk to the leading computer scientists and, some of my professors in different fields, they would say, Safiya, that's impossible. Algorithms cannot discriminate because algorithms are fundamentally math, and math can't be racist. Math can't be sexist. And, we've come a long way, because now I'm anywhere. I met a woman at the beauty shop back in the days when we were getting our roots did before COVID. And I remember, meeting her, and our stylist introduced us to each other. And she's like, oh, what do you work on? And I said, oh, well, I look at, the dark side of the internet, roughly, kind of the ways in which technologies can discriminate. And she started breaking down to me all the like racist tech. And I was stunned. She's like, did you know that and it was like all the things we're talking about today. And I was like, yeah, actually I do know. I know a lot about that. And I helped us know about that. So it's so strange to me that we are now having these conversations in the mainstream. Everybody, like every week, there's more headlines. But see, the sick part of our knowing more is because there's more harm, because the harm is mounting every week, every month. And the harms in some cases are, as impactful as misrepresentation and, stereotyping and like these derogatory images. And, people sometimes say to me, well, it's just like misrepresentation isn't the most critical of things in the world. And it's true. There are things that are more damaging, like when an algorithm decides if you go to prison for the rest of your life, or if an algorithm decides, here's the dog tripping, sorry. If the technology is deciding whether you get food, whether you can cross a border, whether you get housing, whether you can get access to money, those things are, of course, more important if we had to put it in a Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But at the same time, we want to remember that the reason why we study things like racist and sexist stereotyping is because people who have power often have very little contact with the people for whom they lord their power over, right? Or who they are responsible for in terms of the decisions they make. And many people in power, of course, don't look like us on this beautiful panel, the leadership of this organization. Many people in power are making decisions based on stereotypes and these kind of distorted images. When you think about places like Silicon Valley, for example, the fact that there are so few women of color in particular, specifically, and Black women working in Silicon Valley is not just the travesty. The travesty is that the people who work there, who lead companies, who found companies, most of them have no experience with people of color either, at least underrepresented Black, Latino, Asian Pacific Islander, Indigenous people. So they too are basing a lot of decisions about who matters, who to test for, who to care about, who could be collateral damage, right? Based on these kinds of misrepresentations and distortions of our communities. So all these things are actually interconnected and they're really important. And it's one of the reasons why it's just, to me, it's like a thrill to think about so many women in particular getting involved in these conversations. One of the things that when I first started studying like the harmful effects of Google, and I think people really knew my early work for talking about like these distortions of Black women and Latina and Asian women. And I think that there were people who would say, well, Safiya, you can't be objective because you're a Black woman. So you can't really study this. You can't really do it right. And of course, no one ever says that to people who aren't people of color about studying anything. The whole world is weirdly available to everyone but us to study. But I will tell you that I have an advisor. I had an advisor, Dr. Linda C. Smith at Illinois, and she said, I think that because you're a Black woman, you're more qualified. You see things. You look and you ask questions that other people are not asking because of your experience in the world and in who you are. So I want to just underscore that too about this group and all of you who are in this call, is that we see things in different places because we occupy different identities and we move through the world differently in places and spaces that not everybody, especially makers of technology, do not occupy and do not work in. Now, I'm not going to talk about how, I'm not going to talk about them too much because I want to talk about us and I really want to open this up. But I just want to say that we need the insights from this community and from, our communities about what else could be possible and how we would intervene. Obviously, we need the resources, but we also need to put these technologies in service of things that matter to us. Some of these technologies maybe shouldn't exist. I often think about things like, I used to make jokes about how predictive analytics, like predictive policing technologies never got pointed at Wall Street, right? And then somebody made this dope algorithm that actually did predict the likelihood of crime on Wall Street, which, like as a joke, and I thought it was incredible. So, we could put technologies in service of things like redistributing resources in more equitable and fair ways. rather than what we have now, which is technologies that are about sorting and exacerbating inequality, sorting and exacerbating more wealth to the 1%, leaving everybody else to suffer. Every year that we've been collecting data on things like global wealth inequality, every year it's worse than that year than it was the year before. We could put technologies in service of solving those kinds of problems. I have this girlfriend's last name is Say, she's a millennial, and her name's JD, and she's dope. And she's a Black woman getting PhD here in SoCal. And I said to her once, I was like on a tear, and I said, what do they think? We're gonna just sit around and watch videos of other people eating? And she's like, I do that. That's actually a thing. And I was like, I can't handle these conversations, so stop it. But that is the question, right? Will we become acculturated to being slowly, it's like the frog in the pot, and the water slowly heats, right? Will we just become cooked by the slow acculturation, the slow kind of just belief that there's nothing we can do, that some of these things are here to stay? Some of these things should probably be against the law, right? And we see, for example, in cities around the country where communities are coming together and banning facial recognition, organizing against predictive policing, right? We have a lot of power. And the reason we have that power, and I another joke I like to make with my students is that we didn't really need a predictive policing algorithm to know where the police are. Because seriously, you could ask the brothers across the street from me right now. They'll tell you where the cops are at. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's interesting, the kinds of logics about, where to deploy resources, and do those deployments happen in service of people who are most vulnerable, people whose labor and whose culture are the engine that runs so many of these platforms, right? So many of our cultures are I was just with a student this morning who's a new doctor, Kenyatta Nance, who is incredible, who's studying Vine, right? And of course, Vine has now shut down and has been shut down. But, all platforms really get their boost off of communities of color. Like that's how would we even know what Facebook Live was if Philandro Castile had not been murdered on it? So, these are the kinds of things that I think we should be really asking ourselves, is like, to what degree can we resist, redeploy, shut down, and reimagine different kinds of possibilities at this intersection of technology and society? And I just want to say it's great to be here, and I'm excited to be in conversation with you today.
Wow, thank you for that. The whole time I was texting my team, quote that. It's incredible. And
so
when
many
you
gems.
mentioned the millennials eating food, my mom's sitting right next to me, and she always asks me that, like, does anyone really want to see what you're eating? I'm like, yes, they do. But not to digress too much, BD, I would love if you were open to taking your mic off and sharing the question that you just shared in the chat.
Hi, can you guys hear me now?
Perfect.
Hello. So I've been engaged in some discussions on a couple of different IG accounts, just trying to further discussion on being anti-racist, or how we can help dismantle the system of white supremacy. And often I find in the comments, there's individuals who want to engage in like the great unlearn, as it's being coined, but they're immediately being, there's people who are interacting, and they're saying, Black people don't owe you any explanation. You can just go Google it. And that is absolutely true. Black people don't owe anybody any explanation. But then, I've found it quite troubling ever since engaging with CyCo's work and reading your book, Dr. Noble, that Google is not always the answer. So I guess my question is, as we're working towards being anti-racist, what would your recommendation be if we do want to just quickly look up something? Because I think a lot of our experiences, we finally have language for it, like just microaggressions, for example, right? We've known what those have felt like, but only recently have we had that language to talk about it. So for individuals that want to look up the terminology and in theory, what's your recommendation for how to utilize these search engines effectively?
I love that question, and I'm really thank you for reading my book and for being in this conversation with us. And I will say that it's difficult because obviously if you don't know where you're going on the open web, you are going to be reliant upon some type of information broker like a search engine to help you get there. Back in the, and then now I'm dating myself because it's just, I'm old, y'all, but back in the 90s, we used to have to know the URL to go to a place on the internet. And we would have these like phone books that were directories of the internet. It was like a phone book of the internet. And no one on this call was probably alive. It's fine, leave it. And, now, of course, and part of what happened in the early web 1.0, let's say, era was that we kind of understood the internet as like a slower technology. I mean, we really it took time to enter a URL. You had to go through a lot of nonsense. You knew that like some things were all the way off. Some things might be good. You were looking for gems. There were communities of librarians and like DIY hobbyists and subject matter experts who would put together what we called virtual libraries, which was the precursor to search engines. And so when you are acculturated to the web in that moment in time, it's a slower expectation about the quest for knowledge. And of course, think about pre-internet. Again, what the sensibility of people must have been like I'm going to go check out 10 books from the library and I'm going to read all of them. And that's how I'm going to deepen my knowledge and my awareness about something. Fast forward, we're living in a time where people are like, if I can't get it in 0.03 seconds, then I don't want it. So I think that's something that's also, there's more at stake for vulnerable people to live in a world of that kind of like instant gratification and expectation of like the veracity or of credibility of something to be like that when we're using advertising platforms to help us navigate to it, which is of course what Google and Yahoo and all the commercial search engines are. They're giant advertising platforms. So that I think is part of what I try to do in my work is help people just understand like, well, when you're looking at an ad, it's like when you go to the mall, you're going to get what's at the mall, but that's not the entirety of what's possible to be had. And it's also like a bunch of corporate chains. And there's like a whole bunch of other small businesses and artists and other things available that are not in the mall. So, the mall is organized for big business for the most part. So it's like, I think this is one of the things that is important to understand about what happens in these commercial search engines as a like a framework for thinking about how we're going to get the information we need. One of the things I, for example, try to tell legislators all the time is, we should think about things like search engines as the fast food of information culture, right? And why is it that the slow food, organic food movement is for rich people / mostly rich white people? I mean, in terms of like the way and where a Whole Foods is or where food service deliveries happen and these kinds of things. So I think, part of like what we're doing while we're looking for good information to re-educate ourselves is also to be thinking about different processes for re-education and learning. I mean, this is where the professor in me, I know the learning science comes from iteration, from being in conversation, from being in dialogue, from turning a conversation over in many, many different ways, from different vantage points, from really engaging, which is different than it's the first hit and a search engine, so it must be true. And so, we have work to do there about our own expectations and the expectations we set in our families and our communities. And, I think these are important things. At the same time, libraries, universities, schools, those are the democratic institutional counterweights to big tech controlling the information landscape. So let's be clear, we need to triple down on those too. And big tech is actually profoundly implicated in defunding every democratic institutional counterweight in the information and knowledge ecosystem.
I can't even handle all of the entire, like, I can't keep up with the everything
wonderful
that you're
question.
saying.
I'd love if you
Oh, did somebody say something? Pardon me if I like heard something in the background, my bad. Does someone have their hand up, or is that just a picture of a hand in your profile?
That's me. My name is Vanya. I'm actually starting up a company where it basically puts people like of color, especially those who are chefs, cooks, and things of that nature, because a lot of them, as I've seen during the pandemic, have lost their jobs, and a lot of them are not getting the, I guess, client space. Long story short, I wanted to see like what I realized with social media and having those platforms is that we have to pay for the SEOs and the marketing and all that stuff. My thing is, how do you pay for the right services that won't discriminate? That's where I'm in the puzzle.
I know. I mean, I'm going to tell you that the SEO industry, obviously, we know it's just thousands and thousands of companies buying, selling, trading data every day, 24/7, right? And it's an ad-based business. It's a business of advertising. And so, I will tell you, being a former ad exec, somebody who worked in advertising for a long time, that, that's a money game. Those with the most money win. They break through the clutter, so to speak. So I think it's a really important question. I mean, what it maybe shows is that there's an opportunity for a different way, a different set of products and propositions, right? Rather than like, how do we triple down on SEO as it is currently organized, where those with the most capital win, period, full stop. That is the game. Or those with a lot of technical skill, like Stormfront and white nationalists and white supremacists. My God, they have so much technical skill. It is ludicrous. I mean, the kind of metadata they are embedding everywhere in everything to get their racist trash visible is stunning. And then of course there's like certain industries, the porn industry and other industries, that dominate and put an unreal amount of money into technology innovation in their interest. So, those are the stakes, those are the terms of engagement right now. And I think we need different terms of engagement. I mean, it's like, I wish that I could just say like, oh, go here, we got this already handled. And I'm not sure we do. If we do, somebody tell me and then I'll boost it. But I think that, we have to find some other ways to be visible, but not be hyper visible. Because see, when the big platforms try to make us visible too, you saw what just happened, right? Was it last week that Google was tagging Black-owned businesses, and then bombarded with all these like 1-star negative reviews on all the Black-owned businesses. So those are not the terms upon which you can make us visible. So, this is what I'm saying. These tensions are at play, and it's I don't know the answer.
Do you mind if I add something to
Please.
that? Something I live by is you have to do the things that you need to do in order to do the things that you want. And so as we make these various decisions and what tools we're using, and especially if you are a person of color, go with what makes you comfortable as far as how you're leveraging these tools, and use it to your advantage in the way that you can. Because no matter what, this system is designed against us. So, I mean, and these spaces are now, this conversation is now becoming popular. I mean, you already mentioned this, Dr. Noble, of the work that you were doing before versus the people that are, it's now just reaching pop culture. So it's hard, but I will say, don't feel disheartened. There are organizations and people that are popping up that are working to fight this fight. So I know there are a lot of questions, so please continue.
Yeah.
Kaylee, go ahead. I think your hand's raised. Yeah.
West Coast was before.
Oh,
so
go
I'm
ahead.
going to go ahead and unmic really quick.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Thank you so much for hosting this event. I am getting my entire life just listening. I can't decide whether I'm in church or at school or both, but I love this.
Comedy club.
Yes. So I just basically, I don't know if mine is as much a question as a comment, but I read the article about TikTok and how it was deplatforming or censoring Black creators last year, especially at the height of Black Lives Matter. And the impression that I got, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that maybe we need more people of color and women, Black women, in those spaces where these algorithms are being made. And I think it's one of those where obviously if you're not in the field, you think that there's no one there, but the people who are in the field are like, oh yeah, girl, I know like 7 people, one's at Amazon, one's at, you know. So I was wondering, is there like a career path that we can maybe even suggest to friends and family who are looking to go into the space to sort of help increase the numbers? I mean, this is obviously a more long-term goal, but you know, it's something that I feel I could probably do. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think like doesn't Blavity have like a huge Black tech conference, and you know, where everybody, you know, can get together and meet, and you know, I think that there are Afrotech. Thank you. Yeah. You know, I think there are gatherings, and these are increasing for sure. And there are people who are like really interested in working in, yeah, everybody drop it in the chat. That's it. Come on, bring it. You know, I think there are like places where tech workers are gathering and working together and trying to also make new technologies and products. You know, I think of like Zebras United, of like founders of color, you know, people who are all trying to, I can't even vouch for any of these organizations like legit, because I don't work in these and I don't go to all these conferences, but I think I know there are places where people are gathering and thinking differently. I know that when I talk to Black tech workers in particular, they are able to apprehend the faulty technology design. So even before I saw the, I can't remember how to, maybe it's Chelsea. Yeah. Like, you know, this comment about the tools, I think people who are working up close to the tech also in some cases see the tech design in incredibly flawed ways and are trying to intervene. Of course, it's difficult when you're like the only person of color on the team and like all those politics or the only woman. So people are, but they're able to kind of share out that information, and that creates different kinds of pressures. Tech workers obviously walking out of companies and saying like, we're not putting our labor in service of things like drones that are going to kill people of color across the world. We're not doing that. So there's many different levels of like political and professional intervention that are happening. Of course, I'm in academia, so I feel like that place is a jam too, where we can more and more people of color. I mean, I can't even tell you, like when like I said, 10 years ago, I was the only Black student in my PhD program. Now so many students of color are coming that I get to work with who are getting into PhD programs. And I'm like on like dozens of PhD dissertation committees of people who are thinking smart and critically about technology, who are writing and doing policy work and really smart things, and also working in industry or working in academia. So I feel like there's a lot of different spaces and places because there's a conversation that's legible now. And that is super exciting. And of course, you know, CyCo, this is a really important organization where I feel like community is building too. And people are, you know, getting connected and figuring out like, how do we work strategically? It's also like everything. we take it an issue at a time, or we work on the issues we really care about, or where we have knowledge, or we have certain kinds of insight. So, just like our being here together, I feel like a lot of amazing things can come of it too. And yeah, I feel like I want to say you're supported, and we can help you feel more supported too.
Thank you for sharing that question. I think we have time for one more question. I feel like we should have made this.
That went by so fast. I talked too long, you guys. My answers are too long.
No, we love it. Yeah, I mean, everyone is just taking in everything you say, and it's so incredible and so needed, especially. So, Callie, I'll let you go next, and then we'll do an event wrap up, and then maybe we can get Dr. Safiya on again soon for part 2.
Say when.
Oh, thank you. Hi there. I'm so glad to be here. I can't believe I made it in as the last question. I feel like I won Jeopardy or something. I'm sure it feels exactly like this. Anyway, I have a question, kind of a good jump off from the last one. Basically, all of this stuff is really interesting to me and blowing my mind because it's putting words to things that I think many people have witnessed, especially things that have been amplified in the past year. I find it interesting that we just brought up TikTok as the example, right? Because I literally remember being on TikTok in June, even though I followed Taz and she was like, don't do it. And it seemed like they literally flipped a switch, and all of a sudden you see more Black and Brown Indigenous creators. And I've been talking about this concept with a lot of my Black YouTuber friends who I've been helping with their strategy or whatever. And, we riff on things, and it's just like a lot of times they're potentially the only Black creator that they see in their niche. And even if they do put out videos that are highly searched, there's still a lower chance because of the algorithmic bias that they would be suggested within YouTube's algorithm. And so it's just a lot to think about the weight, of course, of all that's working against us. And my question, without having the technical background of how this works, is there opportunity for some sort of collective power to retrain the AI or algorithms, in some percentage or some capacity? I don't know if that's bringing GameStop energy to this, but I'm just curious to learn more about what the opportunities are there, especially as somebody who's working on allyship and stuff, and just trying to learn more about if amplification could actually support.
Yeah, I love that question. I mean, I feel like, Taz, you might have some thoughts on this too, but I will say that, yes, we can try to optimize these tools. Maybe I feel like these tools are, projects of white supremacy, quite frankly, and capitalism. So it's real hard to figure out how we're going to optimize our way out of that. Having said that, I think we should keep pressure on building new and different kinds of internet spaces. I think there's still so many possibilities. I feel like we're just at the beginning, not at the end. I think these monopolies owned by Google and Facebook are not it. And we should be resisting bolstering these monopolies and their completely unjust global business practices. So, would I say spend your life force doing that? No. Do people need to eat? Yes. So yes, do you need to figure out how to pay a bill and get your stuff handled while we also make a different set of possibilities toward freedom on the side? Of course, we're all playing different roles, and this is why we have to be linked up and connected and supporting each other and bridging. So people, and then you bring what you know from those experiences of the work that you do now, toward other spaces too. So I don't know, to me that seems so much more gratifying as a way to live than to figure out how to make YouTube better. Okay, that's my take.
Thank
it's
you.
Probably not an inspirational note to end on. My bad.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's real, and we're here to be real about what's actually going on and give insights in the purpose of these they're called creative research events for a reason, right? Because we are using your insights and feedback through surveying, we're asking questions in the chat, and this dialogue is helping us create material. And hopefully we're gonna, we didn't necessarily officially announce this, but we are partnered with UCLA's Center for Critical Internet Inquiry. And this is something that was established last month, which is so fucking amazing.
I know,
don't know how else to say it.
We're about to get it.
We're about to get it. And so these insights and all of your feedback and commentary, we're going to take this and we're going to do some shit with it. We don't know what yet and how, but we're going to do some shit with it. And I'm not even going to bother sharing slides, but I will share our petition that is set up right now to basically have realistic asks around what we want for our national privacy legislation. We don't have one right now in the United States, unfortunately. And the US is really used as a playground to test unethical data practices straight up, which is really terrible to think about. But this petition is going to allow us, the two most important things that we're trying to do is create diverse subcommittees that we would like to have in place, and diversity, both ethnographic diversity and then also domain expertise, different people that are outside of this paradigm to be able to give their insight to make sure that it's properly, implemented within legislation. And then the other is an annual review of this legislation to make sure that we can keep this legislation up to date with current technologies and times. But we have a long way to go before change happens, but this is a step into it. And, I wish we could stay on these calls all night long and we could just be here engaging in this dialogue. And it is tough to hear when you have questions and there aren't necessarily direct answers for you to move you in a direction that's going to give you like, okay, what now? But we at Cyber Collective and Dr. Noble and so many other organizations, we're working on the what now. We're working really, really hard on figuring out what now. And I continue to plug this, right? Our work cannot happen without your contribution. So if you can share the messaging, contribute today to our iFund Women campaign. We're not a nonprofit and we don't want to be a nonprofit because we're women of color and we want to make money. And so we're going to figure out a way to be able to get everyone paid. And we're going to figure out solutions to these issues that we brought up today. So I thank you all for being here. I appreciate you, Dr. Noble. I mean, I'm gonna see you in a few weeks. I'm gonna just put it on that.
Get over here.
So
Get over here.
We love all of you so much. And I say this every time to the incredible Cyber Collective team, Caroline, Vanessa, Farah, Rebecca. I love you guys. And these women are outstanding, and all of you in here as well. So thank you for your curiosity, for your empathy, and for the community that we're building. And don't get got, y'all. Get CyCo. Thank you.
That's right.